I was 48, standing in the kitchen of my suburban home, the kind of place where every countertop gleamed under the weight of routine. The coffee maker hissed, the clock ticked, and outside, the world moved on without a second thought. My life? It was a well-rehearsed script: work, errands, dinners with my husband, Tom, who was always buried in his phone or his golf game. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. But there was a hollowness, a quiet ache that had settled into my bones over the years. Something was missing and I couldn't name it. Not until that summer when everything changed. When he changed everything. My stepdad, Richard, had always been a presence in my life. He came into it when I was 15, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a voice that could command a room and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He wasn't my father, but he filled that space in his own way. Steady, dependable. Always there when Mom was too fragile to handle the world. Even now, at 67, he had this magnetic pull, a charisma that made people lean in. He lived just a few streets away, in a house that smelled of cedar and old books, and he'd stop by sometimes, unannounced, with a bottle of wine or a story that made me laugh until my sides hurt. Tom didn't mind. Why would he? Richard was family. Harmless. Or so I thought. That summer, though, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a crack in the foundation you don't notice until the whole house groans. Richard started coming over more often, lingering longer. He'd sit at my kitchen table, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug, and talk about the past, how he'd watched me grow up, how proud he was of the woman I'd become. His words were warm, but his gaze, it was different. Heavy. Like he was searching for something in me. Something I didn't even know I was hiding. I'd catch myself holding my breath, my skin prickling under the weight of his attention. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But deep down I knew better. It was a Tuesday in July, one of those sticky evenings where the air clung to your skin like a second layer. Tom was out of town for a conference, and the house felt too big, too quiet. I was in the living room, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading when the doorbell rang. Richard stood on the porch, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, a bottle of bourbon in one hand. "Thought you might need some company," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I should have said no. I should have made an excuse. But I didn't. I let him in, and that was the moment the script of my life started to unravel. We sat on the couch, the bourbon burning a trail down my throat as we talked. The conversation started innocently enough: work, the weather, the neighbor's new dog. But then it turned like a river bending toward a cliff. Richard leaned closer, his knee brushing against mine, and asked about Tom. Was I happy? Did he still make my heart race? I laughed it off, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Richard's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment the world stopped. "You deserve more," he said, his words slicing through the haze of the bourbon. "You deserve someone who sees you. Really sees you." My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm that drowned out reason. I wanted to pull away to change the subject, but I was caught in his orbit. His hand reached out, slow and deliberate, and rested on my thigh. The heat of his touch seared through the thin fabric of my dress, and I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to stop this, but another part of me, a darker, hungrier part, wanted to see how far this would go. His fingers tightened just enough to make my breath hitch, and he leaned in, his lips so close I could feel the warmth of his breath against my cheek. "I've always seen you," he whispered, and those words lit a spark I didn't know I was carrying. What happened next was a blur, a collision of impulse and desire. His lips found mine, urgent and unyielding, and I didn't push him away. Not at first. The kiss was a storm, fierce, forbidden, and so alive it made my skin hum. My hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and for a moment, I was lost in the rush of it all. The bourbon, the heat, the weight of his body against mine. It was everything I'd been missing, everything I'd been too afraid to crave. But then reality crashed in, sharp and cold. This was Richard. My stepdad. The man who'd helped raise me. What was I doing? I pulled back, my chest heaving, my lips tingling with the ghost of his kiss. "We can't," I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but he didn't move away. "No one has to know," he said, his tone calm, almost pleading. "This stays between us. Just a moment. Just ours." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to sink back into that reckless heat and forget the world. But the weight of what we'd done, what I'd let happen, was already settling in, heavy and suffocating. I stood up, my legs shaky, and crossed the room, putting distance between us. My mind raced, replaying every second, every touch. What if Tom found out? What if someone had seen Richard come over? The walls of my perfect little life felt like they were closing in, and all I could think was that I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. Richard watched me, his expression a mix of longing and something else, something that made my stomach twist. "You won't tell," he said, not a question but a quiet command. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with panic and shame. He left shortly after, the bourbon bottle still half full on the coffee table, a silent witness to my betrayal. I stood in the doorway, watching his car disappear into the night, and felt the world shift beneath me. What had I done? And why even now did a part of me ache for him to come back? The secret we'd created was a living thing, pulsing in the silence, and I knew it would haunt me. I just didn't know how much it would cost. The days after that night were a haze, like I was walking through someone else's life. Every morning I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection, searching for the woman I used to be. But all I saw was her, a stranger with flushed cheeks and secrets burning behind her eyes. That kiss, that reckless, forbidden moment with Richard, had carved itself into me, a wound that wouldn't heal. I could still feel the press of his lips, the heat of his hand on my thigh, and it terrified me. Not because it happened, but because a part of me wanted it to happen again. Tom came back from his conference, oblivious as ever, rambling about meetings and bad hotel coffee. I nodded, smiled, played the part of the dutiful wife, but inside, I was unraveling. Every creak of the house, every ping of my phone made my heart lurch. What if Richard said something? What if someone had seen him leave that night? The secret was a weight, pressing against my chest, and I didn't know how long I could carry it. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time lapse fueled by bourbon and loneliness. I'd avoid Richard, rebuild the walls between us, and everything would go back to normal. But normal felt like a lie now, and deep down I knew he wasn't done with me. A week later I was in the backyard, pulling weeds to keep my hands busy when I heard his voice. "You're working too hard out here," Richard said, leaning against the fence, his silhouette framed by the late afternoon sun. My stomach twisted, a mix of dread and something else, something that made my pulse quicken. He looked the same, all easy charm and quiet intensity, but his eyes held a knowing glint, like he could see every thought racing through my head. I wiped the dirt from my hands, forcing a casual tone. "Just needed some air," I said, but my voice was too tight, too thin. He stepped closer, and the air between us thickened, charged with everything we weren't saying. We talked, or at least we tried to. The weather, the roses, anything to avoid the truth. But the words felt hollow, and the space between us was alive, humming with tension. He reached out, brushing a stray leaf from my hair, and his fingers lingered, grazing my cheek. The touch was electric, a spark that set my nerves alight. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said, his voice low, almost a confession. I wanted to step back, to tell him to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. My body remembered that night, the rush, the fire, and it betrayed me, leaning into his touch instead of pulling away. The backyard faded, the roses, the hum of the neighbor's lawnmower, the world beyond the fence. It was just us, caught in a moment that felt inevitable. He closed the distance, his hand sliding to the small of my back, pulling me closer. "Tell me you don't feel it," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I didn't, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him. Not tentative, not hesitant, but desperate, like I was drowning and he was the only thing keeping me afloat. His hands were everywhere, urgent and possessive, and I let myself fall into it, into him, into the chaos of wanting what I shouldn't. This time it went further. The shed at the edge of the yard became our refuge, a shadowed corner where the world couldn't reach us. The air was thick with the scent of earth and desire, and every touch, every whispered word, was a step deeper into the abyss. I didn't care about the consequences, not then. All I cared about was the way he made me feel seen, wanted, alive. But when it was over, when our breathing slowed and reality crept back in, the weight of what we'd done hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a kiss anymore. This was a line crossed, a secret that could destroy everything. I pushed him away, my hands trembling as I straightened my clothes. "This has to stop," I said, my voice cracking. "This can't happen again." Richard's expression was unreadable, but his silence was louder than words. He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of defiance, or maybe something darker. "No one will know," he said again, like a mantra, but this time it felt less like a promise and more like a challenge. I watched him walk away, his footsteps steady while my world tilted. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guilt was a living thing, clawing at me, but so was the memory of his touch, his voice, the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I was spiraling, caught between wanting to erase it all and wanting to run back to him. And then, just as I thought it couldn't get worse, my phone lit up with a text. It was from Richard, 3 words that turned my blood to ice. "We need to talk." My heart stopped. What did he mean? Was he going to tell someone? Or was there something else, something I didn't yet understand? The secret we'd built was starting to crack, and I had no idea how to hold it together. That text from Richard, "We need to talk," sat in my phone like a grenade, its pin half-pulled. I read it over and over, each word tightening the knot in my chest. What did he want? To confess? To end it? Or worse, to pull me deeper into the mess we'd made? I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't been able to look Tom in the eye since that afternoon in the shed. Every time he smiled at me, oblivious and trusting, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. I was drowning in guilt, but worse, I was drowning in him, Richard, his touch, his voice, the way he made me feel like I was more than the shadow of a wife. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I avoided Richard for 2 days, ignoring his calls, deleting his messages unread. But the silence only made it worse, like the air before a storm, heavy with what's coming. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, needed to know what he meant, needed to put an end to this before it consumed me. I drove to his house, my hands shaking on the wheel, the familiar street now a gauntlet of memories. His car was in the driveway, the porch light casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me. I knocked, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the neighborhood. He opened the door, and for a moment we just stood there, the weight of everything unspoken pressing between us. His eyes were tired, but there was that spark, that dangerous pull that had undone me twice before. "You shouldn't been avoiding me," he said, his voice low, not angry but wounded, like I'd betrayed him. The irony wasn't lost on me. He stepped aside, and I walked in, the scent of cedar and old books hitting me like a punch. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn, and it felt like stepping into a confession booth, one where sins were spoken but not absolved. I didn't sit. I couldn't. "What do you want, Richard?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. "Why the text? What's there to talk about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey, his movements slow, deliberate, like he was buying time. He handed me one, his fingers brushing mine, and I flinched, the memory of the shed flooding back. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said finally, his gaze locking onto mine. "About us. What we could be." My stomach dropped. This wasn't about ending it. This was about more moments, more secrets, more of the life I'd been too weak to resist. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was insane, that this was wrong, that we'd already gone too far. But my body betrayed me again, my skin humming under his stare, my resolve crumbling like sand. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine, and I let him take it, let his thumb trace circles on my wrist. "I know you feel it too," he whispered, and God help me I did. The room shrank, the world narrowing to the heat of his touch, the rhythm of his breath. But then he said something that snapped me back to reality, something that changed everything. "Leave him," he said, his voice steady, unyielding. "Leave Tom. Be with me." The words were a slap, cold and brutal. Leave Tom? Uproot my life, my marriage, for what? A forbidden fling with the man who'd raised me? The fantasy shattered, and all I could see was the wreckage, Tom's face, my mother's grave, the neighbors' whispers. I yanked my hand away, my voice trembling. "You're out of your mind," I said. This was a mistake. All of it. But Richard didn't back down. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm but not cruel, and his eyes burned with something desperate, something I hadn't seen before. "I did you a favor," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "All those years I kept my distance, kept this buried. But I'm done pretending. I want you, and I know you want me. A favor." That word hit me like a freight train. Was that what he called it? The kiss, the shed, the secret that was tearing me apart? Or was it something else, something older, something I'd been too blind to see? My mind raced, piecing together years of glances. Moments I'd brushed off as innocent. Had he always wanted this? Had I been the favor, the debt he'd waited to collect? I pushed him away, my chest heaving, and stumbled toward the door. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice breaking. "This ends now." But it didn't end. Not yet. The next morning, Tom was in the kitchen, his face pale, his phone in hand. "We need to talk," he said, echoing Richard's text, and my heart stopped. He'd found a message, not from Richard, but from me, a draft I'd written in a moment of weakness, confessing everything, unsent but saved in my phone. I'd forgotten to delete it, and now it was staring him in the face, a digital confession of my betrayal. The room spun, my knees buckling as he read it aloud, his voice cracking with every word. I tried to explain, to lie, but the truth was there, raw and undeniable. What happened next was a blur of tears, shouting, and silence, the kind that cuts deeper than words. Tom didn't leave, not right away, but the man I'd married was gone, replaced by a stranger who couldn't look at me. I didn't see Richard again. I heard he sold his house, moved away, leaving nothing but rumors and the ghost of his touch. The favor, whatever it was, had cost me everything: my marriage, my peace, my sense of who I was. And yet, in the quiet moments when the house was empty and the world was still, I'd catch myself wondering what might have been. Not because I loved him, but because he'd seen me, truly seen me, in a way no one else ever had. And that, more than anything, was the secret I'd carry forever.